Hey everybody, I'm here to talk about Noragami. So Noragami is the story of God. About God anyway. Yes, whoa, hold down. I know, politics, religion, and all that. Now hold everything and please don't throw anything at me. This isn't what you think. I'm not talking about this guy. I'm talking about this one. Yeah, the one in the tracksuit. This is Yato, and he's, let's just say, a less than stellar god here in Japan. He has big dreams of being a hotshot god, but those are all in his head for now, and he's pretty much got no worshippers and no shrine to his name. Noragami is the story of Yato's attempts to become a major god that's well known and well loved, and I'm going to talk about what makes this show in particular stand out amongst a sea of anime. You guys see every core that has supernatural stuff and godlike powers. The first reason the show is so special is the way in which it handles its narrative. Let's start with Hiyori here, because she's going to be our lead-in into the world of the gods. Hiyori is like every other Japanese schoolgirl. She's totally hiding a love of pro wrestling from her parents. And day one at 8 o'clock, she gets hit by a bus and survives. So like I said, Japan. Hiyori only semi-recovers though, as she rapidly discovers she now has a problem where she falls asleep frequently and her soul slips out. Whoops. You know, like you do. She also has a tail now. Surprise! The reason she jumps into the road in the first place was to protect Yato, whom she thought was a regular bystander. Turns out, Yato didn't need her help, because gods can't get hit by buses. Man, that must be really convenient. While in soul-only mode, Hiyori is able to converse with the gods and see and hear things called phantoms. With Yato as her only lead into fixing her soul slip situation, she asks him for help and starts to get involved with all of his affairs. So now we're starting to get somewhere. At first, this show seems really intimidating because there's a lot to learn about. We learn about the near shore, the world of the humans, the far shore, the world of the gods, about phantoms and why they are a threat. Phantoms, you see, are created by negative human emotion. They then latch themselves onto humans and cause them harm. Afterwards, we learn about regalia, which are humans who have died but cannot move on, interestingly enough. When Yato gets a regalia named Yukine, we come to understand that regalia are the only way in which gods can fight phantoms. So I bet your head is spinning right now, but don't worry about it. When you watch the show, Noragami teaches all of these things in stages. So it's like you learn the entire narrative in really well thought out layers. It's such a well thought out world. Now if you're wondering, how the heck gods and humans interact? That actually gets answered too. Turns out gods are always there, and they essentially fade in and out of our consciousness. The allegory given is that they're like someone who you pass by on the street and pay no mind to. This is how the narrative gets away with stuff like having Yato spray paint his phone number on stuff and not destroy public property. It in turn allows people to actually call him for his services. I mean, how he has a phone, don't ask. Sure, why not? It's a little weird, but you'll get used to it. After building the story in layers, what's really going to draw you into the world of the gods in Noragami is that it's built very much like the world of humans. Gods have worries, wants, desires. They've made choices that they regret. You see, gods are actually made of human wishes here. So if enough people wish for a war god, then one will come forth from the far shore to match their wish. The problem here being that if this war ends and everybody stops believing in and worshiping said god, it doesn't just revert back into wish energy in the far shore. It gets stuck, desperately trying to survive and be believed in. And when a god is trying to survive, it takes any prayer, no matter how immoral. Without people believing, the god will disappear completely, so all lesser gods, like Yato, live with a sense of fear and desperation. And these are terms we definitely don't think about when talking about God. So this makes Yato and his plight a heck of a lot more relatable to us, the viewers. I don't want to spoil too much right after we get used to, Yato and his bumming around. The world starts to expand. We meet other gods and learn their stories, which all tie into Yato's. One of these gods is Kofuku, a god of poverty, and Bishamon, who's got a massive tiff with Yato and dresses like she's in TM Revolution or something. Despite her crazy, weird outfit, Bishamon is a very powerful god. She's a respected god of war, and she has a ton of regalia. Like, her outfit and everything is regalia. Her method of using regalia and how she fights phantoms help you, the viewer, to understand the scale and level of a real god without having to sit through it in some sort of exposition sort of way. It's not just the gods that are interesting, though. Hiyori herself is a female lead fueled by agency. When she discovers her soul is sliding out of her body, she does ask Yato for help, but afterwards she doesn't just sit around moping about it. She instead thinks it's kind of sweet and hops around town. You are a bird, girlfriend. Helps small children. She's ready for action, and when she sees phantoms in soul-only mode, she doesn't back down, she kicks them in the face. She is a character you can really get behind, and all the actions that she takes throughout the series are from her own hands. Flawed regalia Yukine is also fascinating. Having been chosen by Yato, he's none too pleased that his new master is broke and not well known. He causes all kinds of problems for Yato and gives us insight into just how intense the relationship between regalia and God really is. His own existence is very sad, though, and as the show explores him, we understand the hardship of having to be human and experience the world, while also really not being alive and having to watch everyone live around you. This show may sound really serious, as Yato is running from a past that's really brutal and regret-filled, and Yukine has a tragic backstory that's hinted at, but there's an awful lot of humor to Noragami. The show made me laugh, and as often as it made me think, Yato's fights with Yukine and Hiyori just made them all so endearing to me, and it really lifted the heavy burden that came with Yato's difficult background and the fact that Hiyori is actually in a difficult predicament here. Nobody escapes their past forever, though, and Yato's is steeped in blood and violence, which segues me straight into the sequel to Noragami that you should also watch, Noragami Aragoto. Noragami Aragoto's focus comes in two arcs, Bishamon, god of war, and Ibisu, god of fortune. These gods are famous, and their influence in Japanese culture is large of scale, so what's amazing about their stories in particular is the toll it takes on them to be revered and have deep compassion for humankind. Suffice to say, the backstory of Bishamon and Yato's tiff is given center stage for her arc, and Ibisu's plight at the end of his arc is heavily weighted in something everyone can relate to, trying to find out why you exist, because in Noragami, gods wondered that too. This lets me drive at something that makes Noragami so incredibly amazing. The older I get, the more I really want my anime to sort of make me think, make me feel something. And if you've been following along with some of the ideas in this presentation, and definitely when you watch the show, I hope you begin to ask some questions. If gods are essentially created by people, and they rely on people in the form of regalias to fight phantoms, which also happen to be created by people, you begin to wonder, is the plight the gods face really just a plight we as humans face? It asks a bold question about whether or not we, as humans, are the cause of God's suffering. As we make them from our wishes, we abandon them when we no longer have those wishes. We demand of them, and yet they protect us, and they feel pain for their compassion towards us. Noragami never says any of this. But when I watched the show, I really paused a minute to take all this in and ask myself all these things. It's a world and a concept that really gets you wondering, and that's very special in the world of anime today. Aragoto also opens wide the world of the gods, as we see that they go to conventions, they have politics. We gain insight into how each god operates in his or her own personal space. While this is certainly not edutainment by any means, many of the gods in the show are real to Japanese culture, and I enjoyed learning about them and how they actually fit into the culture itself. I also learned a fascinating thing. Japanese people are extremely polite, guys, even when falling off buildings. How about that? Animated by Studio Bones, this show consistently looks great. This includes the character designs and the scenery, and even the phantoms themselves. They're also colorful and varied in their shape and size. I want to point out the music too, because it's a really neat feature. This show is all about Japanese gods, so the soundtrack utilizes a lot of classic Japanese sounds when the Shinto gods appear, but fuses these more traditional sounds with rap, synthesizers, and sometimes Indian drums to make it all sound urban and hip during some of the action sequences. It almost sometimes feels like a Persona game. It fits the visuals really nicely, so I hope you enjoy when you watch. Like all the shows we're going to talk about today, Noragami is not perfect. The idea of gods appearing in front of people is kind of played loose and fast, so if you nitpick about it, yes, you're gonna find issues. So try not to nitpick. For those of you that are obsessed with the idea that the gods should look like their traditional representations, you're gonna be a little disappointed. That's about the best I can offer you. Aside from those minor things, if you're in the mood for a show that looks great, sounds great, and has a plot that breaks through the piles of trash you guys see in each successive core, you really should check out Noragami and Noragami Aragoto. And if you have a subscription to Hulu by chance, you can binge the whole thing right now. So please, please check it out. Thanks.